Every person you've ever met cares what other people think. That's not insecurity, it's biology. Your brain processes social rejection through the same neural pathways it uses for physical pain. But there's a hidden cost to this wiring. When a survival instinct designed for ancient tribes meets modern life, it quietly reshapes your career, your relationships, and your identity, and most people never notice it happening. In 1995, psychologists Roy Baumeister and Mark Leary formulated the need to belong as a fundamental human drive, as essential to survival as food or shelter. Their research showed that this drive requires two components: frequent, positive interactions, and the stable perception that these relationships will endure. For early ancestors, isolation was a death sentence. Cooperating within a coalition meant protection from predators, shared food, and collective survival. Over generations, staying in the group's good graces became a biological necessity. This tribal drive runs so deep that humans form group loyalties over almost nothing. Psychologist Henri Tajfel demonstrated this through his minimal group paradigm. Tajfel split participants into groups based on trivial differences, such as their preference for paintings by Paul Klee or Wassily Kandinsky. Even when these groups were entirely arbitrary, participants immediately favored members of their own group and actively excluded outsiders. Group membership, Tajfel showed, becomes tied to how individuals value themselves. When that membership is threatened, the brain reacts with alarming intensity. In 2003, researchers Naomi Eisenberger, Matthew Lieberman, and Kip Williams used a virtual ball-tossing game called Cyberball to observe this process inside a functional MRI scanner. When participants were suddenly excluded from the game, their brains showed immediate activity in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. These are the same neural pathways that process the emotional distress of physical pain. Rejection does not just hurt metaphorically, the body registers it as a physical wound. This neural alarm serves a clear purpose when it warns of real, physical isolation, but the boundary between protective vigilance and quiet confinement is remarkably thin. The social signal distorts when the anticipation of rejection begins to outrun actual events, paralyzing action before any real judgment even occurs. To evade this perceived threat, daily behavior begins to warp. Speech patterns soften, physical posture shifts, and personal preferences are quietly traded away to soothe the crowd. In 1951, social psychologist Solomon Asch demonstrated how easily this override occurs. When placed in a group where actors deliberately gave incorrect answers about the length of simple lines, over 36% of participants conformed to the obviously false majority. When outside cues systematically overrule inner awareness, self-trust erodes. Decision-making becomes a chronic exercise in risk mitigation, where choices are constantly delayed or deferred to avoid the slightest friction. Under this constant self-censorship, self-worth becomes entirely dependent on external validation. What began as an evolutionary mechanism to keep an individual safe within the tribe becomes a self-imposed cage, quietly dictating how a person moves, speaks, and thinks. Every day, millions of people make quiet choices that redirect the course of their lives long before any external conflict arises. In the professional world, this often manifests as a slow, silent compromise. A mid-career worker might spend a decade at a desk, executing tasks that feel deeply misaligned with their actual capabilities, simply because the role carries the effortless approval of peers and family. Research surveying 1,200 professionals shows that the fear of negative feedback from managers directly increases career decision-making difficulty. To avoid the friction of disapproval, individuals systematically bypass meaningful risks, declining a promotion that requires public vulnerability, or postponing a transition to a more creative, volatile field. Over time, choosing the socially acceptable path reduces self-efficacy, leaving people feeling increasingly incapable of steering their own lives. This same self-censorship patterns intimacy. In relationships, the drive to maintain acceptance can lead a person to systematically conceal their own needs, opinions, or even fundamental aspects of their identity. When partners or family members hold rigid expectations, expressing a dissenting view or revealing a different life preference feels like a direct threat to the bond. To protect the connection, individuals adopt compliant roles, altering their behavior to mirror what they believe is expected of them. Yet, this strategy carries a severe psychological paradox. By hiding one's true self to ensure acceptance, the resulting closeness becomes fundamentally hollow. The The other person is loving a constructed mask, not the individual behind it. The hidden cost of this protection appears years later as a quiet weight of regret, stagnated personal growth, and a lasting distortion of intimacy itself. A smartphone screen illuminates a dark room. The interface updates in real time, delivering a stream of likes, shares, and comments that serves as a continuous, automated appraisal of personal worth. Micro-experiments show that within 30 to 60 seconds of exposure to these peer approval metrics, individuals actively alter their behavior to conform with the crowd. Curated digital feeds systematically reward highly polished, idealized self-presentation over authentic experience, converting identity into a gallery of approved moments. Each rising digit beneath a post acts as a reward signal, quietly training the brain to repeat whatever behavior triggered the response. Over time, algorithmic feedback loops bias self-presentation, narrowing the range of what people feel safe expressing. This digital curation leaks into the physical world, manifesting in ordinary decisions that rarely look significant on their own. It dictates the clothing chosen for a morning commute, selecting for group trends rather than personal comfort. It alters parenting styles, prompting mothers and fathers to mirror local expectations, such as school choices or discipline methods, solely to avoid silent neighborhood judgment. Even private creative hobbies are quietly abandoned if they are deemed too eccentric to share with peers. In public speaking, workplace meetings, and daily conversations, individuals soften their language and self-censor their actual convictions in favor of safe, consensus-driven ideas that invite no friction. None of these moments feel like a major surrender. There is no single, dramatic breaking point where autonomy is lost. Instead, self-trust erodes incrementally through hundreds of microscopic concessions. The true cost of this constant calibration is measured not in sudden failures, but in missed risks, delayed personal growth, and a slow, systemic erosion of identity, leaving individuals entirely disconnected from their own values. Healthy social awareness relies on perspective-taking and empathy, a calibrated approach to reputation that protects group connections without sacrificing personal values. In contrast, excessive approval-seeking stems from a constant fear of judgment, where self-worth becomes entirely dependent on outside validation. Self-determination theory clarifies this boundary by distinguishing autonomous motivation from external regulation. When actions are autonomously motivated, choices align with internal truths, protecting self-trust and resilience. But when behavior is driven by external regulation, decisions are made to appease outside pressures, creating the persistent sensation of being managed from the exterior. Living under this controlled motivation turns social connection from a supportive bond into an exhausting, constant performance. To reclaim autonomy, individuals can treat daily social interactions as small, low-stakes experiments. The process begins by identifying 2 or 3 core values to serve as a decision-making yardstick, replacing the immediate desire for constant approval. Instead of avoiding perceived judgment, a person might test their fears through minor exposure exercises, such as sharing an unfinished project or expressing a mild disagreement. This allows them to compare their anticipated social catastrophe with the actual, usually quiet outcome. When anxious thoughts arise, cognitive reframing helps examine the objective evidence behind the imagined disapproval. Setting boundaries around selective disclosure keeps social feedback intentional, while self-compassion breaks the cycle of rumination, allowing individuals to maintain deep connections to others while remaining anchored in themselves. Our biology demands connection, not isolation. The modern challenge isn't silencing the world's noise, but learning to hear your own voice beneath it. True belonging only begins when we stop negotiating who we are to fit in. Join the conversation in the comments.